Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The entire fabric of Genoa city seemed to shake under the weight of a revelation so horrifying, so utterly unfathomable, that it threatened to alter not only the legacy of one man but the entire trajectory of multiple families intertwined in power, betrayal, and heartbreak. When Jill Foster Abbott stood trembling in the Chancellor Mansion's grand living room, with its heavy drapes pulled tightly as though even the light of day might recoil from the ugly truth, she revealed a secret she had carried for decades, one she had sworn would never see the light of day, yet one that now poured out of her lips like poison that had been waiting far too long. Cain Ashby, the man who believed himself orphaned, the man who thought he had pieced together some semblance of belonging within the Chancellor, Winters, and Ashby families, was not who he thought he was at all. For his parents, the people whose existence had been cloaked in mystery and whispered half-truths, were none other than the most unexpected duo in all of Genoa city's twisted lineage, Diane Jenkins and Victor Newman. The gasps that escaped from the room were sharp, suffocating, Lily clutching her chest as her eyes darted between Cain and Jill, Devon setting down his glass as if suddenly the weight of crystal was too much to hold, and even Nikki, standing rigid with the kind of practiced steel she had honed over years of war with Diane and Victor alike, found herself speechless for once in her life. The past came rushing back like a dark tidal wave, and Jill, with tears streaming down her face, forced herself to relive the nightmare she had once buried, years ago, before Cain had ever stepped foot in Genoa city, when Diane Jenkins had been thought lost, when Victor had been in one of his infamous downward spirals of ego, greed, and destruction, an affair, short, violent, and hidden, had produced a child neither parent wanted to claim. Diane, desperate for money and power, had given birth in secret, selling the child into a shadowy network of adoption scams orchestrated to conceal the identities of high-profile parents, while Victor, always the master manipulator, had coldly washed his hands of the situation, providing hush money to ensure the scandal would never touch his empire. Jill had stumbled upon the truth years later, when her own business dealings collided with one of the very men who had brokered the adoption. Horrified, she swore to keep the secret buried, believing she was sparing Cain from a life of pain, and sparing Catherine Chancellor's legacy from the stain of Newman corruption. But now, with the truth boiling to the surface, Jill could no longer contain it. Cain's entire existence was rooted in a lie, his identity built on stolen papers, false promises, and the ultimate betrayal of blood. Cain staggered back, unable to process, his hands trembling as memories he thought were innocuous suddenly snapped into new focus, the inexplicable way Victor had always regarded him with a distant suspicion, the lingering glares Diane had thrown his way years ago, as though she recognized something she dared not acknowledge, and even Nikki's relentless mistrust now made sense in a cruel, twisted way. "You mean to tell me," Cain's voice cracked, low and guttural, "that the man who tried to destroy my life, the man who stood in judgment of me time and time again, is my father? That Diane, who has been the root of endless chaos, is my mother?" His words rang with disbelief, but Jill's silence was confirmation enough. Victor, upon hearing the revelation, stormed into the room, his face like granite yet his eyes betraying a flicker of dread, for the mighty Victor Newman was not a man who feared many things, but this, the exposure of a secret he had buried in shame, was a wound to his pride and legacy that might never heal. Diane, too, appeared at the doorway, her voice breaking as she whispered Cain's name, reaching out as if to touch him, to claim him now that the world knew the truth, but Cain recoiled with venom, spitting that she had no right, that neither of them had ever been parents to him, that his true family were the ones who stood by him through years of deception and loss, not these two titans of selfishness and cruelty. The horrible past unfurled itself in Jill's recounting, Diane's pregnancy hidden beneath lies, Victor's calculated abandonment, the child passed around like a commodity until fate delivered him into Jill's orbit years later, when she sensed in him not only potential but a connection she could never put into words until now. The room erupted into chaos, Lily demanding answers about what this meant for their marriage and their children, Devon torn between supporting his friend and reeling at the possibility that Cain's Newman blood might complicate every business and family tie they had forged, Nikki seething with rage at Diane for once again bringing Victor's sins to light, and Victor himself bellowing that this revelation changed nothing, that Cain was still the man he had always judged him to be. But Cain, trembling with a storm inside him, shouted back that it changed everything, because now he understood why he had always felt like an outsider, why his life had been riddled with betrayal and manipulation, why every attempt at happiness had been tainted by shadows he couldn't name until now. Jill collapsed into a chair, sobbing that she had tried to protect him, that she had carried this burden so long it had nearly destroyed her, but Cain couldn't hear her. His mind was ablaze with visions of the past colliding with the present, of Diane's calculating smirk now reframed as maternal cowardice, of Victor's ruthless empire building now branded with the mark of personal shame, of his own soul forever split between the man he thought he was and the son of two of Genoa City's most dangerous players. The horrible past, once buried, had been exhumed, and the reverberations promised to tear through every family, every fortune, and every fragile bond in Genoa City, for the truth could not be undone, and Cain's journey from orphan to chancellor heir to son of Diane and Victor had only just begun, setting the stage for betrayals, alliances, and reckonings that would echo for generations to come. The silence after Jill's confession did not last long, it couldn't. The weight of the words had struck every person in that room like a physical blow, and the ripple effect had already begun its relentless course. Cain felt as though the very ground beneath his feet had opened up, threatening to swallow him whole, and in his mind 1,000 fragmented images collided, memories of Diane brushing past him years ago with that peculiar spark of recognition in her eyes, Victor's cold disdain in moments when Cain had sought his approval, and Jill's strange overprotectiveness whenever questions about his past threatened to surface. He had lived his entire life under a veil, searching for belonging, clinging to scraps of identity, and now he had learned that his blood carried the weight of two of the most controversial figures in Genoa City's history. His voice broke through the charged air like shattered glass. So all this time I've been fighting to prove myself, fighting to be worthy of Catherine's legacy, fighting to be good enough for Lily, good enough for my children, and the truth is, I'm nothing but the product of lies and betrayal. Lily reached for him instinctively, tears brimming in her eyes, but Cain pulled away sharply, the anguish in his expression cutting through her heart. He could not bear her comfort, not when his own identity was collapsing like a house of cards. Don't, he whispered harshly, shaking his head. Don't touch me right now. Because if you do, I'll fall apart completely, and I can't, God, I can't do that in front of him. His eyes darted to Victor, the man whose face had been plastered on business magazines for decades, the so-called titan who had built empires, destroyed rivals, and bent people to his will. Cain's voice trembled but grew stronger as rage coursed through him. You knew. You knew I existed. And you abandoned me. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? What it does to a man? Victor's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. For once, the mighty Newman patriarch had no clever retort, no scathing defense ready at his lips. His silence was answer enough, and the truth of his shame radiated across his hardened features. Diane, however, stepped forward, her voice carrying the desperate tremor of a woman clinging to any shred of redemption. Cain, she pleaded, her eyes filling with tears, you have to believe me, I didn't have a choice back then. I was scared, I was alone, and Victor, her gaze darted to the man beside her, her lips trembling with unspoken bitterness, Victor made it clear that he didn't want you. I thought if I let you go, if I put you in someone else's hands, maybe you'd have a chance at a life better than the one I could give you. Her words hung heavy, a mixture of truth and cowardice, but Cain's bitter laugh sliced through them like a blade. A chance at life? Do you have any idea what kind of life I had? Do you know what it feels like to grow up with nothing but questions? To look in the mirror every day and wonder why no one wanted you? To fight for scraps of love, to claw your way into families that never quite felt like yours? You call that giving me a chance? You threw me away. Both of you did. His voice cracked on the last words, the raw pain cutting through even Diane's practiced veneer of sorrow. Jill, unable to stay silent, rose to her feet, her voice shaky but urgent. Cain, I swear to you, I never wanted you to know like this. I was trying to protect you. I thought if you believed your past was buried, you could focus on building a future. Catherine wanted that for you too. but Kane's anguished glare silenced her. No, Jill. Don't you dare drag Catherine into this. She's the only one who ever gave me a real chance, the only one who ever saw me for who I am. If she knew the truth, if she knew what you kept from me, she'd never forgive you. She'd see this for what it is, a betrayal of the worst kind. Jill crumbled into tears, the weight of his condemnation shattering her. She had carried this secret like a curse, believing she was sparing him, but in that moment, she realized that her silence had only deepened the wound. The room devolved into chaos as alliances and tempers clashed. Nikki's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the noise. Of course Diane would bring more destruction into this family. This is exactly what she does, poisoning everything she touches. And Victor, her eyes burned with fury as she turned to her husband, you've hidden secrets before, but this? This is unforgivable. A child, Victor. You abandoned your own child. Victor finally snapped, his voice booming across the room. Enough. I did what I thought was necessary at the time. I won't be lectured about decisions made decades ago. What's done is done. But his words fell flat, the hollow echo of a man stripped of moral authority. Nikki's lip curled in disgust. That excuse might work on your business rivals, Victor, but not here. Not with your son. Lily, her tears flowing freely now, stepped in front of Kane, her voice trembling as she tried to reach him. Kane, I know this is unbearable. But please, don't let this destroy you. You are not defined by them. You are defined by the man you've been with me, with our children, with everyone who loves you. That's who you are. Not Victor. Not Diane. But Kane's eyes, filled with pain and betrayal, met hers, and for the first time, there was distance between them that Lily feared she might never bridge. How can you say that when everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie? How can I tell our children who they are, where they come from, when I don't even know who I am anymore? His voice cracked, and Lily's heart broke with it, but she couldn't reach him, he was already retreating into a storm of anger and confusion. Meanwhile, Diane, desperate to reclaim some semblance of connection, recounted the horrible past in detail, her voice shaking as she described the night she discovered she was pregnant, the fear of Victor's rejection, the coldness with which he had dismissed her pleas, and the secretive arrangements she had made to give birth away from prying eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing, she insisted, but even as she spoke, the hollowness of her justification echoed in the room. Kane's rage only grew. You abandoned me. Both of you. Don't you dare stand here now and pretend you were noble. You chose yourselves. You chose your pride, your money, your convenience. You didn't choose me. Devon, always the voice of calm in storms like these, finally spoke, his tone measured but filled with quiet anger. Kane, you've always been my brother, no matter what blood says. But I need you to understand something, this revelation isn't just about you. It's about what Victor and Diane are capable of. And it's about the ripple effects this will have on Chancellor Winters, on Newman, on every tie we have. This isn't just a family secret, it's a bomb, and it's already exploding. His words rang true, reminding everyone that the fallout would not stay contained to one living room. As the night stretched on, old wounds resurfaced. Nikki confronted Diane, dredging up every scheme, every manipulation Diane had ever pulled, declaring that Kane was just another casualty of her selfishness. Victor, for once, could not meet his wife's eyes, the shame of his long-ago abandonment gnawing at the edges of his iron resolve. Jill, shattered and guilt-ridden, begged Kane to believe she had only wanted to spare him the pain of knowing the truth. And Kane, torn, broken, and furious, stared at the people around him and realized he had never been more alone. The horrible past had not just been revealed, it had come alive again, wrapping its claws around him, dragging him into a war he never asked for but could no longer escape. Later, when the house had quieted and the storm of voices had dimmed to whispers, Kane stood alone by the fireplace, staring into the flames as though searching for answers in their flickering dance. He thought of Catherine, of her unwavering belief in him, and wondered if she had somehow known the truth all along. He thought of his children, and how one day he would have to explain to them that their grandfather was Victor Newman and their grandmother was Diane Jenkins. He thought of Lily, her love, a beacon he wanted to cling to but felt unworthy of in that moment. And above all, he thought of himself, Cain Ashby, the man who had fought for a place in the world, only to discover that his very blood was poisoned by the sins of two people who had never wanted him. His voice was a broken whisper as he spoke into the empty room, "Who am I now?" And with that question, one that would haunt him for months, Cain realized that the revelation was not an ending, but a beginning, the start of a journey through pain, rage, and ultimately, perhaps, redemption, though the road ahead promised nothing but turmoil. The storm that Jill had unleashed refused to die down. If anything, it only grew more ferocious with every passing hour, and the once sacred walls of the Chancellor Mansion seemed to absorb every scream, every sob, and every trembling confession that spilled forth. Cain had left the living room in a daze, his footsteps echoing down the long hallway like a man walking through a nightmare he could not wake from, and as the others lingered behind in a whirlwind of argument and finger-pointing, his mind drifted into the shadows of a past he never knew he had. For the first time, images of Diane, not the calculating, smug woman he had known in adulthood, but the frightened young mother Jill described, seared his imagination. He could almost see her, alone in a dimly lit hospital ward outside of town, clutching her swollen belly with one hand while the other wiped away tears, a nurse warning her to keep quiet, that no one could know the Newman name was attached to the child about to be born. He pictured Victor, cold and detached, refusing to even show up for the birth, dismissing Diane's desperate pleas with that trademark steel in his eyes, "Handle it. I have no son." Cain's fists clenched at the thought. How many nights as a boy had he cried into the dark, wondering if someone out there cared for him? And the answer had always been no. His so-called parents, the ones who should have been his protectors, had chosen indifference over love. Back in the living room, the battle lines were drawn. Nikki's fury had not cooled, in fact, it had only sharpened into a blade. She stood nose to nose with Diane, her voice dripping venom. "You think you can waltz back into this family's orbit and play the victim? Don't you dare. You knew what you were doing when you slept with Victor. You knew the chaos you'd unleash. And when you gave that boy away, you sentenced him to a lifetime of pain. You don't get to cry about it now." Diane, her face streaked with tears, fired back with a trembling, desperate voice. "You've hated me for years, Nikki, and maybe you always will. But don't you dare stand there and act like I didn't suffer too. Do you think it was easy for me to give him up? Do you think it didn't rip me apart every day? I was young, I was terrified, and Victor," she shot a withering glance at him, "left me with no choice." Victor's eyes darkened, his face hard as stone, but for once he did not interrupt, perhaps knowing any defense he offered would crumble beneath the truth. Lily, still reeling, stepped into the fray, her voice breaking as she looked at Diane. How could you? How could you look at him, even years later, when you saw Cain as a man, and not say something? He deserved to know. He deserved answers. Diane's lips trembled as she shook her head. "I wanted to, I swear I did. But every time I thought about telling him, I saw the hatred in his eyes for me, and I knew. I knew he would never forgive me. I thought it was better this way." Lily's scream of frustration shattered the fragile silence. "Better for who? For you?" Meanwhile, Jill sat in a corner, her face buried in her hands, whispering apologies over and over. She remembered it all as if it were yesterday, the day she discovered the truth. It had been during one of her ruthless business dealings, long before Cain came into her life. She had been in negotiations with a man connected to underground adoption rings, and in the shuffle of papers, in whispered threats and accidental slips of the tongue, she pieced together the horrifying truth. The child Diane Jenkins had given away in secret was Cain Ashby. At first, she hadn't believed it, hadn't wanted to. But the blood tests, the hidden records, all of it had painted a picture too damning to ignore. She had carried that secret alone for years, every time she looked at Cain feeling both maternal pride and gut-wrenching guilt. She told herself she was sparing him. She told herself Catherine would agree. But now, as Cain's anger poured out like a tidal wave, Jill knew she had made the gravest mistake of her life. Upstairs, Cain collapsed onto the edge of a bed, his head in his hands, his mind racing. He thought of Lily's words, that he was more than his blood, but right now, he couldn't believe it. His identity had been shredded. Was he still Kane Ashby, the man who had clawed his way into a family, who had loved fiercely and built a life, or was he simply the unwanted child of Victor Newman and Diane Jenkins, a living reminder of their shame? His chest heaved with sobs he couldn't contain, and for the first time in years, he felt utterly powerless. Memories of his childhood, those lonely nights, those endless questions, blended with the new knowledge, twisting into something unbearable.